script, and then I'll hand it over to you guys, okay? All right, LFG people, hello and welcome to Blockchain Insider. This is the live version at Blockchain Rio Festival. I'm Mauricio Magaldi, and today we're going to talk about tokenization of real-world assets. To do this, I'm joined by Cassio Krupinski, founder and CEO of BlockBr Digital Assets. Cassio, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit how you're doing today and where can people find you online?
Thank you. Nice to meet you guys. Rubens, my friend. Magaldi, my friend. Nice to meet you. I'm CEO and founder of BlockBr. BlockBr is a digital assets. We are tokenization. We divided two types of tokenization: structured tokens and superstructured tokens. And structured tokens is like a receivables. In Brazil, is very normal. And superstructured tokens is like real world assets, mining, energy, and calls, fraction of calls for agribusiness, and that's it.
Good. And we also have Paul Brody, Principal and Global Blockchain Leader at Ernst & Young, EY. Paul, how are you doing? Thanks for being here. Where can people find you online?
It is great to be here. I'm really delighted to meet you in person. It's great to be a live guest on your podcast after being a virtual guest. So thanks for having me, and super excited to talk about real world assets, which is where I think the world of blockchain is headed.
Awesome. And we also have Rubens Neistein, Business Country Manager of CoinPayments, co-founder and CMO at Insignia, and a good old friend. How are you, Rubens? Welcome. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, Magaldi, it's a pleasure to be again in your podcast. And pleasure to be with you guys. You can find me online mostly on LinkedIn. That's my most active social network. I am right now working with real estate tokenization mostly. This is my focus here in Brazil. And let's skip.
All right. Let's get in. The mention here from both the three of these guys is they are alumni at my other podcast, Block Drop. So yeah, super excited to have you guys here on Blockchain Insider this time around. So let's start with the basics, right? So I'm gonna ask each of you how you define tokenization of real world assets. I mean, is there like a short sentence that defines it? Is this too complicated? How can we just break it down for people who never heard about it? What is tokenization of real world assets? I'm going to start with you, Krupinski.
I define real world tokenization with solutions inside the blockchain. That's it. Example, fraction of properties for real estate. Example. We have inside the BlockBr T-properties. T-properties is a good example because we created a DeFi, and inside the DeFi we buy some lands, and in these lands we do the construction with architects, and fraction of these properties will distribute for token holders, and this is a real world asset.
So can real world assets be anything we have in like physical world, Paul? How would we define the RWA portion of it?
So I have a very broad and somewhat simpler definition, which is there's two kinds of assets. In the future, there will be two kinds of assets: on-chain assets and off-chain assets, right? So if it's on-chain, and the only assets that are really genuinely on-chain are cryptocurrencies and crypto assets. Everything else, right? It could be even virtual assets that aren't on-chain. Those effectively are real-world assets. And what we're aiming for is a way to represent your assets on-chain in the same way that we represent assets in the real world. Because ultimately, what I want to do is manage them on-chain in the same way. And so, I'll give you one very simple example. Think about a car, right? If you have a car, there's the ownership of the car, there's the legal ownership of the car, and there's also the actual car itself. And so actually, a car has multiple tokens associated with it. One is the physical asset token, the other is the legal ownership token, and maybe there's another one which is a lease token, right? But we want to represent all the different forms of assets that are going to exist off-chain, on-chain.
I like that. And if I can expand on what you just said, maybe we even have the parts tokens, plural.
Oh yes.
Right? There's a whole supply chain around the car parts that are an industry in and on itself that could be also represented and facilitated through that mechanism.
And we should come back to that later because the requirement for that is going to reshape blockchain infrastructure as well.
Got it. Rubens, what's your take? You're a guy that's been around crypto for a long time, and you got this passion about real estate with you, and you're working towards actually bringing real world real estate into blockchain. Is this the ultimate liquidity mechanism for real estate? How do you approach this?
Well, good question. Well, yeah, real estate is an asset class that it's the most not well known. I mean, it's the biggest asset class in the world, and it has a problem of liquidity. You know, when I don't know if anybody here wanted to sell a real estate really quick, and you probably had to like give a 10 or 15 or even 20% discount to make it happen. In Brazil, I don't know how it works in the rest of the world, but in Brazil, usually to sell a real estate takes an average of 6 months. So yeah, it's a long time. You know, if you need the money, in average, if you need to sell a real estate, it's going to take at least 6 months. I don't know how is it in other countries, but I believe that it's quite the same. And it's a problem of liquidity. So when you tokenize real estate and you can offer small amounts for people to buy and sell, and even use these tokens as a collateral in a liquidity pool, you can bring liquidity to the asset. So it's a real estate asset with a very strong liquidity problem. Then you can solve with tokenization.
I like that. Liquidity is the name of the game, right? So I want to expand on it. First time I heard about fractionalized ownership, and the reason why I asked you about the car is that was what came to my mind. What's a fraction of a car? It's the parts, right? So when I think about the house, it could be like a time sharing aspect, because then you're splitting, the asset in weeks or days, and you own a day or two or a week of the year. This is a very common practice in many business models, and the parts is the obvious, business model of the automotive industry. So what else can be fractionalized, Paul? What have you seen that is now unlocking liquidity because it's now fractionalized, and what types of cuts around the major, the underlying asset have you seen?
Can I complete your question?
Yeah,
I'd like to ask Paul, what is the most incredible or crazy thing that you ever saw tokenizing?
Well, that would be some kind of bored ape, would be the most crazy thing I've seen. Cartoon characters, but I think, so, this question you're on about sort of fractionalization and tokenization is, I think, ultimately economically transformational. And we spent a lot of time sort of thinking about this, I would say like somewhere in the range of 7 or 8 years ago at EY, which is what makes a good candidate for fractionalization, right? And the things that really make good candidates for fractionalization share some common characteristics, like vacation homes or cars, right? One characteristic is low utilization, right? If you own a vacation home and it's not on Airbnb or VRBO, it's not getting used very much, right? So, I have a beach house, and even though it sort of breaks my heart when guests come and they break stuff, it also breaks my heart when I pay the mortgage and I don't get any money back. So, I've decided that we're better off fractionalizing it and letting it out. So that part works really well. Beach houses, cars, etc. So it has to be shareable, and it has to have low utilization, and it needs one more characteristic, which is that ownership of the asset needs to be widely distributed. If there's only a few companies that own the majority of these assets, then they will choose not to fractionalize it because they often make more money holding capacity back from the market. And you have to be able to implement that fractionalization. So we wouldn't really have things like Airbnb and VRBO if we didn't also have digital remote locks, online cleaning services. You need a lot of infrastructure to enable shareability. And so blockchain is just part of it. Tokenization and fractionalization depends on, I think, really the convergence of two technologies, which is potentially blockchain and IoT connectivity. I will say this though, like we looked at this 7 or 8 years ago, and it was a really cool idea, but I think it's going to be one of the last things that really gets tokenized and scaled, primarily because IoT has to mature and blockchain has to mature, and both of those are still kind of coming together, right? It's so easy for us to imagine really cool use cases, right? And instead, people are focused on the stuff they can do now that makes money now. And that a lot of that's going to be more fractionalization of financial assets, things like receivables, payables. Financial assets are really good because they're already digital. If it's already digital, it's much easier to migrate from off-chain to on-chain.
That's the whole story about adjacencies, right? You're next to that. It's a different form of digital, and you're off to the races, right? So it's more like it's more familiar and it's easier to adopt. But I like the whole situation with the IoT, because one of the first use cases I reported on my other podcast was one in Japan where timeshare rentals were enabled by an IoT device on the doorknob, the door handle, and you go and you would read a QR code or get closer with an NFC phone on which the wallet held the asset for that week. So you could enter the property based on that. So, but it's very fringe still use case. But in your opinion, Cassio, what do you think? I mean, I like the convergence bit, and it's a long-term play. But on your experience, what has been the one asset class that has been easier to onboard people to, and why?
It's not easier. It's not easier. I think these tokens or these offers always will distribute inside the community. And it's not easy because we are working a lot to create the culture. And it's hard, but the process is so fast. And this word, digital assets, transform physical assets in digital assets, is so fast. And blockchain is a new protocol, and we can understand about it. Oh, you'll be first.
Got it. Now, we have a difference between the traditional world where there's a lot of privacy and obscurity, which is another way of calling privacy, but we won't get into that. But when you're on chain, especially in public blockchains, there's the opposite, right? We don't know the actors, but we see the data. How are we solving this at scale? You know where I'm headed with this question.
I think so. I mean, I personally think, first of all, that you shouldn't assume that you really have pseudonymity on chain, right? My prbrody.eth, my ENS address is in my wallet, so you can watch my wallet. We don't have as much anonymity in the same way that, you know, we sort of know who's on the other end of the internet. But I think for me, it is important that we industrialize privacy. That's been a big focus at EY. Consumers seem comfortable sharing their personal data. Enterprises won't do that. So for us to unlock enterprise use cases, we have to have privacy. In my mind, there's really two types of privacy that we're focused on. Number one, can I move tokens and assets around under privacy? And number two, can I have private smart contracts? Can we have private shared logic? And one of those, at least, I feel like we've pretty much cracked. And we built a ZK optimistic rollup technology called Nightfall, and it's being implemented now as Polygon Nightfall, a public layer 2 network. And then our second technology is called Starlight. And Starlight as something I'm really excited about, because you'll be able to mark up a standard Solidity contract and compile it as a zero-knowledge circuit. And then you'll be able to have a sort of smart contract-like functionality under privacy. So I think ultimately that the goal is that to have logic, because if I have a fractionalized asset, it's not just that I a token, but I often want to have some logic in it, like I have to pay a share of the mortgage, or I receive a dividend from the rental income. So fractionalized assets that are backed by business logic and cash flows, I think in the long run are going to be much more valuable than just like, hey, I own a 1/12 of a Bored Ape. That's different.
Yeah, and the thing about enterprise privacy, I think, and if that's already solved, which is great, is it eases on adoption of enterprise use cases, which is probably the critical mass we need to turn this into a real market. But also, no company wants their trade secrets like volumes and prices and tax rebates and all of that good stuff floating around the internet for anyone to see, right? So if we are in the right path to privacy on chain, that means that we'll ease on like the worries of the compliance officer or the infosec officer of any enterprise company, that now they can use a decentralized infrastructure to finally gain the scale and remove all the friction for a specific process in an industry-wide perspective, which wasn't the case before that. So that's a big upside and probably disruptive in multiple industries. You Rubens haven't been only in real estate. You've been in crypto for a long time, and you've seen the increase on hacking and exploits, etc. Do you feel that this is kind of a barrier for adoption of tokenized assets for the common person? Is it one of them? Which other do you think are the impediments for widespread adoption of tokenized assets?
Okay. Well, I think that the UX, I mean, the part that the hacking and all this stuff, it's, I mean, obviously that is important, and people are afraid, with a new technology, if I can be hacked or what can be, I am the custodian of my own tokens, and we heard that a lot of people lost, they put their Bitcoin or other tokens, and there's an advantage of being your own custodian, but it's also an issue, right? So I believe that with the UX increasing, all the teaching people how to use, how to send tokens, how to keep tokens safe, it's a very important thing to make it more the adoption to increase. That's something that I consider it very important. And also the UX. When we started a few years ago, receiving and sending Bitcoin was like a pain in the ass. And now everyone can download just an app and easily open your account and easily send and receive, like making a PIX transaction. I always say that Bitcoin is like a global PIX, or USDT you can send all over. And yeah, it's a global PIX. Okay. And so for having all this asset class, so let's say that you want to buy gold, and now we have tokenized gold, right? I think it's an asset class that it's amazing, because gold is heavy. You don't want to. Somebody can steal from you. You're gonna keep it on a safe deposit box or at home, hide it in your.
You can wear it.
Yeah, exactly.
I believe that's the main use case.
Yeah, exactly.
You can say the same about Bored Apes.
Yeah. And so I think that tokenizing gold is amazing, because you can take it everywhere in your wallet. You can keep it safe. You don't have to have it, like it's in for real. And you can use it as a collateral as well.
Yeah.
So, but you have to know how to handle and to keep it safe. But I think gold is another class, real class asset that it's amazing that is being tokenized.
I like that. I don't want to disagree with you, but I want to explore one aspect of tokenizing physical assets that we haven't touched it yet. When we do the whole non-custodial, self-custodial thing with crypto, it means that we hold our own keys, our assets live on the blockchain, and we're responsible for maintaining our access to those assets. Nobody can access them but us. When we tokenize real-world assets, we do the same with their digital cryptographic counterpart, but the real-world asset keeps existing in the physical world, on the metaverse, right? That means custodians are in place and we need to trust them. And when we think about blockchain, we think about trustlessness, right? And that's going to go for you, Paul, again. What are the top mechanisms that you've seen work to maintain that parity and security when tokenizing physical assets?
Okay, so it's not just physical assets. So fundamentally, right, if you think about sort of all transactions, right, I have money, you have stuff, real or virtual, my money for your stuff. That's what we're doing. And the challenge here is the minute we leave the world of crypto assets, right, what matters here is how do we know that my money is real, and how do I know that your stuff is real, and how do we avoid, if you think about sort of friction in commerce and how to build truly effective markets, it's not effective for me to have to go and check to see that this house actually exists or that the gold is in the vault, right? So this is where you have to have a third-party attestation, right, that party is trustworthy and that they are actually accurately representing what they have on chain. Today, if you think about it, what most audit firms do is they do an audit, and the audit says, we checked, and it seems like the company in question probably did what they said they did in the last financial year. Well, that's like 9 months ago by the time the audit comes out. What you need is basically kind of almost real-time attestation. And the rules in the audit profession don't yet really support real-time attestation, but the technology in many cases does, right? I can compare very quickly the money that you have in a bank account with the number of like tokens that you have on chain, right? I can dispatch some very unfortunate first-year consultant to your gold vault to count all the bars of gold, right? That's not a fun job, but somebody has to do it, right? So that kind of attestation is essential. Yeah, I want to be able to see, and I want to see a standard emerge where when I look at a token for gold or for something else, I would like to see the ability that I want to see a link that says the existence of this asset off-chain has been externally verified by XYZ party, right? That's going to be, I think, essential for having this kind of truly liquid, high-speed, commerce. And some of it's going to be very easy, and some of it's going to require ongoing IoT connectivity. I mean, and a gold bar is an easy one. But how about something like a barrel of oil? Do I know where the barrel of oil is? Like, did it get spilled? Is it on a boat? Right? Has it been delivered? So there's going to be a huge amount of work involved in building the infrastructure that supports real-world assets and makes it so that I can transact immediately with confidence around those assets.
We're back at IoT again and the convergence, absolutely.
IoT and regulation, right? And by the way, one thing that's also going to be really important is you'll hear people talk about the need for oracles. And one thing that's going to be extremely important to understand is that oracles are really useful, but you have to also trust the oracle, and you have to recognize that it's not always possible to verify data from multiple locations. Only UPS knows if they delivered your package, right? So we have to get used to the idea that some parties, we have to understand the difference between being a trusted third party and the central authority. Blockchains allow us to get rid of central authorities. They don't allow us to get rid of the need to trust other people, and I hate it when people say we're going to head for a trustless environment, because there is no such thing. We can't have it. It won't work.
I like that you touched on regulation. These guys in Brazil have been working a lot with regulators. I want to just understand, Cassio, from your perspective, what have regulators, in your experience, and I know you're not only in Brazil, but in your experience, what have they been doing right that you feel like, oh, this is the path forward, they understand what they're doing, I feel comfortable that they got this, and they're going to move towards the right direction for the industry? And where do you think that they are still missing yet?
That's a good question. Yeah, we are working a lot here in Brazil and with a regulator very, very close to us. And now is just possible receivables and gold. I like so much because gold is very liquid, and I don't know. We are talking with regulators very near of us, and I can't talk more about the regulators because every time we think to do a lot of things, but it's not possible. And okay, BlockBr, we just working receivables and gold because it's very liquid, and real estate. I think the world will change, and the next step for regulators, if the focus is inside the CBDC, because we'll have some control inside the country, and after that, the tokenization will explore more and more, but step by step.
I'm gonna turn to you first, and then I want to hear Paul's global perspective. But Rubens, what's your take on what's been done right and what's been done, like what's still missing from the regulatory standpoint?
Okay, I see that the CVM, that is the CSE in Brazil, I think when they opened the sandbox a year or more ago, year and a half ago, they opened opportunity for the entrepreneurs in Brazil to work side by side with them to build a regulatory framework that is going to be good for the entrepreneur and for the investors, because in the end, the regulators they want to protect the investors, right? So I think that this was a very good movement. Work with entrepreneurs, so they are open. They're not completely closed. That you cannot do this, you cannot do that. And I don't know how in other countries. I don't know if probably they also have a sandbox, a regulatory sandbox. But that was a very good way of saying, to the entrepreneurs, let's work together and let's build a good framework for the market. But in the other hand, they just opened the opportunity for 3 or 4 companies. We would like to have, I applied for the framework, we couldn't do it. They just choose 3 or 4. And these 3 or 4 or 5 companies are going to build the first movement, the first regulatory rules for the whole market. So that was, in my opinion, one of the mistakes. But I see that they are open and they are talking with us. But right now they are just, sending some letters for the guys that are doing some movements without asking them, and monitoring the market of what have been doing. So, well, that's what I see right now.
You. Paul, is this sandboxing thing? I know there are a few regulators around the world that are open to collaborating or even doing consultations with society in general. What were the things you saw that were really smart and really, really work? And what are the major misses from regulators in your global experience?
So in general, I'm very fortunate. I get to talk to regulators and central bank authorities all over the world, and I would say maybe share. There's a couple of things that are clearly working, right? So one is a sense of urgency, right? The rate of frauds and scams has finally reached a point where regulators have a sense of urgency about blockchain, and they're taking it very seriously. I had a very interesting conversation with a regulator a few weeks ago, and they invited us in to talk about kind of blockchain, crypto assets, stablecoins, and central bank digital currencies. And I asked them, I said, you guys I came into this room and there were like all the senior people from the country's national bank in the room. And I was like, okay, you guys are taking this very seriously, and has the crypto winter, the decline in asset prices, affected your thinking? And they gave me a message that I took away as incredibly bullish, which is they said, this crypto winter wasn't material to the global financial system, but the next one will be, right? Which I took away as an immensely optimistic kind of view about the broader technology. So they've got a sense of urgency. They know it's important. Secondly, I like some of the people are starting to establish what I think are some reasonable and smart principles. The Bank of England kind of came out with one that's clear and simple, which is same product, same rules. If it's a security on the stock exchange, it's a security on the blockchain, right? And this idea that like it's a different technology, so we should have completely different rules, I think doesn't make sense and fundamentally isn't fair. That being said, there are clearly going to be some limitations about the blockchain ecosystem. There are two areas where I think regulators could do better. First of all, regulation through enforcement is not as good as regulation by actually saying what the rules are, right? And by the way, the number of enforcement cases is a tiny fraction of the number of people the number of bad actors in this space. There are so many people who should be facing prosecution, right? And I worry that sometimes the small number of prosecutions is sending a message which is your odds of getting away with it are pretty good, and I don't love that message. Second thing where I think there's an opportunity for improvement is prioritization. There's a million things happening in crypto, but I really believe we could improve the quality of the marketplace enormously by doing one thing important and well first, which is regulating stablecoins. Almost everything in DeFi is built on stablecoins, right? The minute we establish clear rules and regulations for stablecoins, there will be a wonderful cascade of follow-on behavior and a flight to quality. And the message will be so clear so quickly, I believe, which is there is in any market with a high level of uncertainty, where there's varying degrees of quality, there is always a flight to quality. The problem right now is very few people actually know what quality is. How do I know which stablecoin issuer really has assets to back them and which ones don't? If the regulators required audits and they published the results, we'd know, right? And then the companies that were doing a good job and managing their assets responsibly would be rewarded by the marketplace. Regulation can make markets function better, and the most important thing right now is to regulate stablecoins, and from regulated stablecoins we will get a cascade of good effects.
I like where that's headed. Let me offer you guys some of my thinking around that. I love the collaboration aspect. This is the era of collaboration. I don't think there's going to be any major technological or societal breakthrough without collaboration. Like the era of the individual illumination is gone. I mean, we're not there. We're past that. So much has been invented individually already. It's going to take a lot of effort for one person to come up with something that's really unique at this point in our history. So collaboration is key, and I love that regulators are open, to that. In Brazil, all of the financial services regulators, be it insurance, central bank, and investments, are collaborating. We're talking about open finance in Brazil, which is completely an advancement of everything that's been happening around the world, and that's the path forward. What I have in terms of shortcomings that we're still trying to regulate things with old frameworks in a new paradigm. And that is impossible.
Good approach.
If you write a PDF and you print the PDF, that's never going to make a dent in the behavior that exists on chain. So my word of encouragement to regulators, and I've been talking to regulators for the last 7 months steadily, is be on chain. Learn to code. Because for these people, the degenerates that we are in DeFi, code is law. If you want to play the game in the new world of decentralized data infrastructure, you cannot write in the Diário Oficial. It's not going to work, right? You can't just write, you issue that on the paper. So if you want to really make a difference, and the first jurisdiction that nails this is going to attract so much money and so much talent, that's going to be hard to compete with them. So I just want to leave it out there. It's not a topic for a conference. I just want to react to what you guys are saying. So I've been mediating these panels, and one thing that really struck me is that the panelists have high hopes of many types, and I'm a very optimistic person. So I just wanted to go through each of you and pick your brains on what you guys' hopes are, what you think is most inspiring in this world of tokenizing real world stuff. What is your biggest hope, Cassio, for like going forward that is going to really turn things around and just unlock the wealth that we're hopeful for?
The challenge is so huge. We are working to tokenize, example, agribusiness to create a solution for the market, for the niche, and gold and silver to create stable coins to distribute out of Brazil, example, obviously using the marketplace or white label platform because the technology is just to bridge to distribute. And we are working, there's a lot of projects inside the BlockBr, but sometimes I forgot. Agribusiness, gold, silver, real estate, fractional real estate for luxury house. Now energy, to transform energy. The profit inside the token represents just the energy. And is very hard, but the solution can be good. That's it inside the BlockBr. I'm talking about some experiences inside that, but it's very difficult because sometimes we can talk with the regulator, and it's possible just to offer. It's just possible to do the private offers. That's it. And for public offers, And a lot of times I'm talking about the investor of token is not exist because the money for liquidity is inside the banks, is inside the other companies, and we need to create the culture and bring the new investors. And I would like to ask you, Paul, can I?
Yeah. Sure.
What do you think about the NFT? Utility tokens, and what do you think about the decentralization and the democratic market with tokens? It will be possible in 1 year, 2 years. What do you think about it?
What kind of a market do you mean?
In general, I think in every market.
So I think it's going to be
using blockchain. For sure.
So my expectation is that these markets will come on stream relatively slowly as enterprises and individuals get comfortable tokenizing the assets, and there's some regulatory environment. So you need two things. You need a tokenized asset, you need a friendly regulatory environment, and you need some supply of sophisticated buyers and sellers, right? And one of the big mistakes that Mauricio was talking about before, I think one big mistake is sometimes countries, they want to attract blockchain businesses, and they think, I'll just make the rules really easy, or I'll make the rules really friendly. That's not enough, right? It's not enough to make the rules easy or friendly. You actually have to go and there has to be a market. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how easy the rules are. If there are no buyers or sellers in your country that I want to sell to, it's not worth it. So, that's an important thing in terms of driving that forward. But I'm an optimist, right? I talk to some of our largest clients. They're thinking about a possible future where they issue 1 to 2 million NFTs a day that represents each one of their parts or components or products. And by the way, when we get there, that's going to reshape the global blockchain infrastructure, because you can only do that in a layer 2 or really layer 3 level when you start to think about the scale involved. So we will get to layer 3, right, for consolidating really massive volumes of components or supply chain parts, et cetera. But I know you wanted to get to people's hopes as well.
Yeah.
My turn? So I think what I hope for is that we will be building a fairer global ecosystem for commerce. So we live in the age of digital monopolies, and Metcalfe's law, right, which means that networks become more powerful as they get more participants. That's why everybody wants to build their own private network, their own private marketplace, their own private blockchain, right? They want to get critical mass in the network, and then once they have it, they want to tax all the transactions. They want to make that money forever. And I believe, the reason I believe so passionately in public blockchains is it's the one place where we should be able to do commerce. Eventually, we should be able to do commerce with shared business logic and privacy and no central authority that can decide to tax everybody's transactions. And when I say tax, I don't mean government tax. I mean like I'm just in the middle and I established a monopoly and I've just decided that I'm going to charge you more, right? That's what happens all the time in traditional Web 2.0 monopolies. And so the only monopoly I want to see in Web 3.0 is Ethereum.
Rubens.
Vamos lá. I remember when I was like 20 years or 25 years ago, I wanted to invest my little money in some good investments. And the best ones were forbidden because I didn't have the minimum amount to invest to have higher yields. And that was making me, very angry. And why I can't, I want to invest my money better, and I couldn't because the highest amount, the minimum amount was like much more than I had. So I believe, and I enter in the tokenization market because my passion is to democratize the investment, to make all good investments available for people that don't have these higher amounts, and they can profit with their own money equal with the guys that have millions. So I believe that's one of the things that make me passionate about working with blockchain and tokenizing assets.
Wow, that's you guys are all very inspiring. Thank you. I'll share my hope for this. It's that we finally see public blockchains as public goods, right? And treat them as such and invest in them collectively. Because we're in the verge of changing the mindset from economies of scale to network effects. And that changes how we interact with each other and how we interact with money and all that good stuff. So I'm hoping we can look at these things as public goods and take care of them in such a way. So that wraps up today's discussion. Thank you all for joining us. This was very, very good. Great ideas, great insights. Just a quick reminder to let you know that the views of our panel are their own and not necessarily the opinions of the companies that they are representing. Thank you all so much for joining us at the stage. Stay weird, LFG.
Obrigado.
Obrigado.
Valeu, pessoal. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Cassio. Rubão.
Obrigado.